we're going to listen to great wisdom of the Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning and Shavua Tov. I have to say that for me, it's been an amazing weekend to be able to meet the Kahal, to meet the whole community, to see the synagogue, the center, and all of the people that are involved. It's been an inspiration for me, and I'm going to try without. Can you hear me like this?
Yeah.
It's tough. I'm going to try. I just don't want to get feedback. So I have to hold this down. Hold it closer. Okay. And I want to say I'm going home very much inspired by the community here. This morning we are speaking about our children, as I understand. And I have to say at the very beginning that I am no expert. I am a parent of 5 children. I've raised them with my wife Margarit to the best of our ability. I was a headmaster of a Jewish day school for 7 years. And I'll tell you a little bit about the nature of the day school. But I've been teaching my entire professional life since I was 20 years old. So all I can do is to be able to give you some insight from my experience. But it's not expert. It's just what I am. And so what I do this morning is to offer you my perspective and my experience and my understanding of raising Jewish children in this world. And as always, whatever it is that I share with you, I share it with you from my heart to yours. But you're not obligated to take any of it. You can choose what it is what you find meaningful and not meaningful. There is nothing more Jewish than teaching children. We say it every day, twice a day in our Shema Yisrael. Vishinantam lebanecha. You are to teach this to your children. And that's remarkable. We take it for granted possibly, but it's enshrined, it is embedded in our daily liturgy, in the most central prayer of our people, that we teach our children. So I want to look at that a little bit. It's 2 words, Vishinantam lebanecha. Teach it to your children. That means that the primary teaching in our people, right, for the Jewish people, is from parents to children. Nothing else. It doesn't say make sure to get a teacher. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say send your kids to school. It doesn't say that. Why? Because there was no school. It is entirely about parents and children. So, historically, what happened was that there was a problem with children who didn't have parents, orphans. And the Hachamim were very concerned about that, because the only way the children learned among the Jewish people was the parents teaching the children, because that's what it says, Vishinantam lebanecha. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Gamla was his name, and Chazal, the Hachamim say, Oto ha'ish zachur latov. That man should always be remembered for good. Because what Rabbi Yoshua ben Gamla said was, what will we do with the children that don't have parents to teach them? So he revolutionized the nature of how Jewish children learn. And the truth of the matter, it was a huge change that people were very reluctant to accept, but he insisted and he convinced the other Hachamim to accept that we need to start a public schooling system for the children. Why? Because not every child has a parent that he can learn, or he or she can learn from. And so he said, we send the children to a central place to study. The parents ask a teacher to teach their children on their behalf, to fulfill the obligation. You see what he's doing with the mitzvah over here? He's completely developing it, changing it. Why? Just to make sure that every child should have the opportunity to learn. And from that time on, that is how it worked. And because of that, because the pasuk says, right, the Torah says, "Shenantam lebanecha," that it has to be to children. The Hachamim say, look, at the end of the day, we can ask a teacher to teach, we can send the children to school, but we can't get out of the fact that this is what it requires, that parents have to teach children. So it says, what about the rabbis that are teaching their talmidim? Well, the Gemara, at least they're honest, and they say, the truth of the matter is that a rabbi who has studied a great deal has no obligation to teach anybody. Because it says, Vishinantam lebanecha, he has an obligation to teach his children. But they say then, except for his talmidim, if there are students that wish to study genuinely with this rabbi, right, with the scholar, and they spend their time trying to learn from this person, they are like his children. And so then he has to teach them everything. Because he's obligated from the pasuk to teach them everything. But there is one thing that remains, and this is something that I used to say to all of the parents in my school. Because we have a tendency to believe that if we send our children to a Jewish school, they're taken care of in terms of their Judaism. And nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be a bigger mistake. And what I tell the children is, what I tell the parents is, the single most effective and powerful and influential teacher in a child's life is that child's parents. Nobody can do better or has more influence than a parent, whether you like it or not. Yeah. It's just the way that it is. And so although it is valuable to send children to a Jewish school, especially Noam, and I'll say we have the headmaster of the school here, we have the chairman here, and I have to say, I'm going to pause 1 second to say, and teachers, yeah, I want to say, Kol HaKavod. That school, for whatever it's worth, I mean, I led a school, I'm involved with schools much of my life. It is an excellent school. At least from what I've seen so far, but it's an excellent school. And one of the reasons why it's an excellent school is because the students are immersed, and this is what I focused on when I was there. I wanted to look at the Hebrew and the Torah of what was being taught there. The children are immersed in the study. So you have 2 classrooms for every grade. Physical classrooms. And that is so important because the environment of the learning is just as important as the data, as the information of the learning. And so when the children go to study Torah or they're studying Hebrew, they're immersed in it. It is engaging them completely. And so the Hebrew language is swimming in their mind. The words of the Torah are native, right? They are in their original language. And so it's very important because when we study anything, in whatever language it is, there are nuances in the language. A word like this is not the same as this word. And when you translate it, it's lost. And that's very important. Not to mention the fact that I saw that the children are very happy. And the teachers are happy. And that's a credit to the leaders, because it trickles down from the top. And I used to tell the parents in my school, because what we did in my school was we taught the children all 5 books of the Torah by the time that they were 11 years old. And they did it with review. And some of the parents came to me because in around 5th grade, we teach them Vayikra. Vayikra is not an easy book. It deals with purity and impurity and a lot of sophisticated adult things and sacrifices, korbanot and animals, all in. And the parents came to me and they said, Rabbi, why are you teaching the 10-year-olds, boys and girls, Sefer Vayikra? And I said to them, I just have one question. Are your children unhappy? They said, no. I said, tell me when they're unhappy. Otherwise, this belongs to them. It's their Torah. They can learn it. So, I'm speaking about the school. The school is important because it is supplemental. We don't think about it that way. We think that the school is central and home supplements. And what I would encourage you to consider is the opposite. The home is center. The school supplements. and you want the school. The reason you send your children to a Jewish school is to ensure that when they are not home, they are supported and embellished and encouraged and enhanced by professional people who are able to teach them important things. But nothing, not the best Jewish school on this planet, will take the place of the base influence and building of a child with his or her parents at home. So that being the case, what happens at home? It really is the most important question. And what I will say to you perhaps might be a bit uncomfortable, but nonetheless I believe absolutely true, and so I will say it to you. If the wish is, and it may not be, I'm simply assuming you know the room, if the wish is that the children grow up with a strong connection to their Judaism, they must see that their parents have a strong connection to their Judaism. And when I say see, I don't mean what the parents say, because kids don't care what you say. They don't care. I don't know if you've noticed, they don't care. Right? Kids pay attention to what we do. They do what we do. You can watch them play. If you watch children play, they play what you do. They see you do it, they play it. Why? Because they model it. So that might not be very easy, because for us, let's be honest, our own Judaism may be not 100% clear in all of our minds. It may not be so easy for us to do what it is that we want to do, or that we think maybe is good for them to see, but not so comfortable for me to do. That's life. That's reality. But if we are honest with ourselves, that's the entirety of parenting, isn't it? I said yesterday at some point, I don't remember anymore when, but one thing that we do in the relationships that matter to us is that we limit our freedom. Because all of us as human beings are very free, right? We have a complete ability to do whatever it is that we want. In other words, there's nothing stopping any one of us in this room right now to say, you know something, I'm moving to Cancun, I'm going to sit on the beach, and I'm going to, live my life out over there. You'll say, well, but you have a family, and you have a business. Okay, good. So those are things that you choose to keep. But nothing's stopping you. Not that I want to give anybody any ideas. I'm just saying that we are completely free. There are, in this life, because of the nature of our freedom, there are thousands of possible lives that we can live. And I'm sure we fantasize about it sometimes. But we need to choose one, because we only have one run. And if we live our lives only thinking about what I might do, then my life is always in theory and not in practical living. So we collapse all of the other possibilities and we choose one, and that is the one that we engage in. But it also means that I choose to limit my freedoms in order to have a life. And I choose to limit my freedoms in order to be able to share my life with somebody that matters to me. So I'm sure that if you're married, you recognize that there are certain things about you, right? We're all very broad people, very complex people, and there are certain things that we choose to compromise in order to be able to engage with another person. Is this just me? Is it just me? It's the way it works. And we do even more so with our children. We choose to limit our freedoms in order to be able to be connected to other people. And with our children, we do it a great deal, especially when they're young. And so what I say to you is this. If Jewish life, Jewish identity, is an important part of your family, and it's something that you wish your children to have, it must be modeled. There's no other way. I wish I could tell you there was another way, but there isn't. It must be modeled. And that means that it might even require you to do things that you don't wish to do, but you nonetheless do for the greater good. because you do wish ultimately that your children should in the future be connected to the Jewish people. Because the reality is that the Jewish people, they will carry on and survive. I have no question about that in my mind. But there is absolutely no guarantee that you and I will be part of it. That's a choice that we have to consciously make. And it isn't an easy choice. But if you're here, those who came before you chose it. And so it's a question for us to be able to choose it. And choosing it, interestingly, means more behavior over learning. It's wonderful to have the learning. But the learning will not carry us through. It's behavior. And that's why it's Vishinantam levanecha. Teach your children. Why is it focused on parents and children? Behavior. The primary learning is in the engagement of behavior. And that's why even with a rabbi and his students, the rabbi is supposed to be the scholar, right? It's supposed to be academic. But that's not how it's presented in the Talmud. To learn from the rabbi really means to be able to be with the rabbi on a daily basis and see how he lives. So what does the student do? It's called shimush. Shimush means you're there to help. Why? Because otherwise you're just getting in the way. If you can help, then stick around. And by sticking around, you observe the life in motion. How it actually works in any given situation with what it is that I know. How does it practically manifest? So there's some crazy stories in the Talmud. The student goes to one of the rabbis and he says, "Please, can I be your student?" He says, "Sure, fold my talit." That's his answer. You think, okay, maybe I teach him something. No, fold my talit. What kind of crazy answer is that? Well, it's very simple. If you want to stick around, I would love to have you around, but I have things I've got to do. So if you can be helpful, b'chavod, you can stick around. And that's why Chazal say, the Chachamim say, Shimusha gedola mitalmuda. They say the service or the helping is greater than the learning. Because it's the access point to the learning. And more importantly, it's an access point for relationship. And that's what's important. Data alone, information alone, doesn't survive. And that's why I'm saying, even in the school, to immerse the students in the context of the environment of what it is that they're learning is extremely powerful and helpful. But everything happens at home. The home is the center. The school is supportive, not the opposite. And what it means is that if we really wish to be a strong Jewish family and to have strong Jewish children and that they should grow up to have strong Jewish identity, it is what they observe at home that really makes all the difference. And it means that as parents we have to make tough decisions and sacrifices as to what we do. So, do not underestimate, for example, Friday night dinner. It should be chok velo yavor. It should be an absolute imperative. And even, it's a question, your children, they'll get older, they want to go out Friday night. Friday night dinner is a must. Don't underestimate how powerful that is. And things of that nature. I'm going to say one last thing, and then I will open for questions. And this is perhaps the most difficult part of the talk. And that is not a particularly religious thing. Children always will look at their parents first. And they will do what their parents do, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. And I'm sure you've had the experience of being with your children and realizing, oh my gosh, I'm like my parents. We all have that experience, right? Because we don't know anything else. That's what we watch, we learn, we don't even realize that we do. When we really have strength, we can be conscious and say, you know something, mom did it this way, I'm going to try and change it. Dad did it this way, I'm going to try and change it. We try and change it, and then the patterns come back, and so on. You know, it's part of our. But this element of consciousness is the most important, and it is the most difficult. And I say that as a parent. And I say that as a son also of parents. Yeah. This is psychological. The most important thing that we can ever give our children, the most precious and valuable thing that we could ever give our children, is what's called secure attachment. And what that means is that a child knows that he or she is loved unconditionally and recognized for who they are. And that they can go out in this world and they can make mistakes and they can play and they can explore and they know that they will always be welcomed home. That doesn't mean that you have to accept everything that they do. You can punish them, you can scold them, you can tell them, but you will always do it with an underlying love and acceptance of the child. And that is essential because that means that a child has a very strong awareness of the value of who they are in this world. If we don't succeed in giving our children secure attachment, and it's hard for us because we haven't had it, we don't know what it looks like. We have to learn to do this. Yeah? If you have had it, God bless you, you won the lottery. But if you haven't had it, it's hard. We're not sure how to do it. And it requires real active learning of how to do it because it means that we also have to accept ourselves to be able to show somebody else that they're also valuable and acceptable. If I don't accept myself as being valuable and acceptable, it's very hard for me to do that with other people. That's the truth. And the reason is because if we are not able to succeed in this very difficult task of giving our children secure attachment, they will be looking for it for the rest of their lives. They will seek acceptance. They will seek love, even if it's not very good love. Even if it's not very healthy love. They will seek it wherever they can find it. And if they don't believe that their home, their Jewish life, their parents, their environment was recognizing of them and nurturing of them and valuing of them, they will look for it any place that they can find it, and they will take it every single time over what it is that they didn't have. That is a hard truth. I know it is. I know I'm telling you a hard truth, and I know that I'm saying something that might be very lofty, but nonetheless, it's worth striving for. There was a well-known British psychologist, his name was Donald Winnicott. And Winnicott said one thing that was he said many things, very important, but one thing that he said that he was famous for is be good enough parents. You don't have to be perfect parents. Be good enough. And good enough means do what you can to ensure that your children have secure attachment. So the work around that is valuable. Yeah, and how? Well, I leave that with the experts and the educators and the Rav and the head of school and you know, the chair people and so on. But I say to you without any question, that is the most important. And if a child grows up in a home that is strong Jewishly, which means the Jewish behaviors, the Jewish rituals, the Jewish learning is something that is valuable to their parents, and they see it modeled, not just spoken, and they feel secure attachment at home, it is the best possible thing that you can do to ensure the next generation of Jewish people. And then around that, you teach them information, you send them to a good school that supports it, right? They have good information. That is the best thing that we can do. And it's not all or nothing. So like Winnicott said, be good enough. So it's not either it's perfect or we're not doing it at all. Do the best you can do. Because by definition, the best is the most anybody can do. You can't do better than your best. Yeah? You can change gradually what best means, right? But right now, you do your best. We all do. But genuinely so. Genuinely so. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you, giving me the opportunity to share that, and I very much respect the fact that you're here to share it with me. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
The floor is yours. Take the opportunity. how do you know this is actually providing the kids what they need?
That's a really good question. The question is, the secure attachment is of course important, and we all think that we're doing the best we can regarding that, but how do we know that we're doing it? So really the truth is, the most important way to kind of know is, again, it's difficult, because it's not about looking at what it is that I'm doing with the kids. It's more a very honest question of how it is that I feel about myself. So I'll give you an example, right? I mean, if we really want to get into this, we can. I mean, I'll give you some, right? But it's a question of how it is that I feel about myself. So I'll ask you a question to consider for all of you. We say that we love ourselves, and we are accepting of ourselves. But I would ask you, and I'm not saying that you don't, but I would ask you to consider the following question. How do you take care of yourself? In other words, if you treated yourself like a child in your care. So if you had to take care of a child or take care of a young person in your care, or for that matter another individual really in your care, would you treat that individual the way that you treat yourself? So your sleep schedule, how does that go? I'm not talking about, the kids and once they're put, you got to do what you got to do. You have to do what you got to do. But I'm saying when you're actually ready to go to sleep. How do you take care of yourself? Would you do that if there was a young person in your care the way that you do? How do you eat? Would you give the people, the nutrition that you eat appropriately and make sure that they're... I'm just asking. I have no idea. Maybe yes, maybe not. I'm just saying these are questions that are valuable to ask. How do you speak to yourself? What's happening in what is the voice in your mind? Even if you say something, you're late. Oh, you're always late. Really? Are you always late? I can't believe, this kind of language in one's own mind. Would you speak to somebody in your care the way that you in your mind speak to yourself? Are you with me? Why are these important questions? Because I can recognize by exploring this internally as to how I value myself. And I can say that I value myself from now till the Mashiach comes. But again, proof is in the deed, in action, and not just in what it is that I'm saying. And if one values oneself, how does one treat oneself? It's not a question of selfishness, it's just a question of self-care. As one great man said, arrogance, or humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. Right? It's just making sure that you're paying attention to other people, but it's not to think that you're anything less than you are. The other thing that I will say is, and this is a tough one, but you can try it if you're really brave and courageous. The next time that you're looking in the mirror, back at yourself, look yourself in the eye. We never do it. We look in the mirror, we look at, my hair, and how's it going, and the wrinkles, maybe there's a few more wrinkles coming, and I look at, seeing if I look okay. We never look at ourselves in the eye. It's very uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to look other people in the eye, but it's more uncomfortable for us to look ourselves in the eye. And when you allow yourself, if you're brave enough to actually try it, and I encourage you to try it, do it for 2 minutes. It will feel like an eternity. Put a timer for 2 minutes, and just look at yourself in the eye, in the mirror. Let the water settle, right? Let it settle, calm, and without looking at it, just see who is this person that's looking back at you. How do you feel about that person? These are real. If you're asking really, this is what you do. And if you are able to do that and say, I love you, well then that's a very good indication that you can provide secure attachment. But if you look back and you have real difficulty at looking who it is that's looking back at you with the mirror, well then it just means it's okay. It just means there's work to do. You got to get to know this person and love this person. And so the work is turning in and building the self-care and self-awareness and self. And that then, genuinely, it pours out. So you don't have to try to do it. It's just the way that you feel and the way that you do it. Because if you're that way with yourself, you can be that way with your children and the other people around you. Again, not easy, but that's one way. Question?
I I like what you say about the attachment.
Thank you.
Right? And stability. But there also could be an element of growth. You mentioned that the best that we can do changes. So how can we actually balance that? Right? Because potentially you will grow in a particular field which might not be sustainable. So how can we balance that with kids?
If I understand what you're asking, you're saying it's wonderful to be able to provide the secure attachment and care and so on and so forth, but you also want to ensure that children are growing.
And also the family.
And the family is growing. Right.
You start doing it,
right.
Maybe you shift that search.
Yes.
How do you manage that?
So there's always an awareness of what it is that the family is capable of doing, right? You want to be able to aim at the top. There's no reason why Friday night dinner should be the only thing that a Jewish family does, right? I mean, there is a very rich repertoire of engagement in life, in Jewish life. Aim for the top. There's no reason not, yeah? But the question is also in terms of what it is that the world is doing with us, what it is realistically, in which environment we are realistically raising our children, and how, what our lives entail. So of course, it doesn't take away the fact that you should always be encouraging yourself and the family to be able to do the most that they can. And then you observe, where are things starting to kind of weaken, or that needs attention? What needs attention? And the truth of the matter is, as you will know, every child is absolutely different. So what works for one may not work for the third. Yeah, I mean, my youngest child, God bless him, he's not the same as his oldest brother. They're worlds apart, actually. My oldest son is 25 years old. My youngest son is 15 years old. There's 10 years between them. They weren't raised by the same parents. I was 22 when I had the first one, and I was 10 years older when I had the second one. It was just different parents. Different family, different parents, different city, different life, different everything. It's like a science project. He's raised in a completely different environment. And he's a different child as it is. So that's part of our challenge, right? That's why there is going to always be, for him, Shabbat is very different than Shabbat for my oldest child. And I have to be able to learn how it is that I need to be able to engage my children that way. But one thing that I try to do is that they should know that I love them, and that they can speak to me, and that I'm very open to their perspective and understanding how it is, but they also respect me because I respect them. And so while my son, Shabbat might be harder for him, he will respect my wishes and engage in ways that I require him, or I ask him, please, to engage with me. But I also am sensitive to what it is that he can do. So I don't make him go to shul the way that my older children go to shul. But there are certain times where when I know that I'm going to ask him to do something, I'm going to cash in my chips, right? He'll do it. Yeah? So that's a balance. It's a matter of being able to maintain a faithfulness with the child, an engagement with the child, where when you ask what you need to ask them, you know that they will come through for you because of the relationship and because of respect. Yeah? So you don't cash all your chips in at once. It's important to be able to balance it and question it. Yeah? I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's kind of how I... Yes?
Two questions. I'm a product of the classic American cheap education system.
I'm sorry.
Product of the 70s and 80s. There was bullying, sexual abuse by teachers and students, physical abuse by teachers and students. Has that been, first of all, has that really been dealt with? Because, and they buried it, and they intentionally buried it. So first of all, I mean, has that been dealt with in the education system? Because that to me is an important one to over the Senate schools. The second issue is, I never understood why at 5th grade, 6th grade, when kids are still perfecting understanding of the Greek, basic understanding, we're pushing them to terrorism. And I don't understand, honestly, if Jewish education is to teach a love of Judaism, why are we forcing them to get that level of understanding, which they're not even ready for?
Okay, two very good questions. So to repeat, the first question is that there was an experience of sexual abuse and bullying from teachers to students in the Jewish day school system in America during the 70s and 80s. I got that right. And the second question is, it seems that by the time the kids are 10, 11 years old, we're pushing them into Aramaic, when we want them at the very base just to be able to have some Hebrew and yet we're plunging them into Talmud study, which is, a complete enigma. Have I got you? Yeah, two very important questions. The first question, with regards to the first question. I think that one caveat I will make is that I am not sure that was, and I want to be clear by saying this, I'm not in any way minimizing the serious issue that you're raising, right? However, I don't think that it was ubiquitous in every Jewish day school and environment. There were different levels, right? I mean, I was also a product of the Jewish day school, I was in Los Angeles, but there's no question that it was there. And if it wasn't sexual abuse, there was definitely some kind of, moral, and emotional abuse that might have gone on. I think that it's very important to recognize the progress of society. As I do think that, at least in the mainstream schools, right? And when I say mainstream schools, I mean schools of the bigger communities, the more moderate, centrist communities, schools, like I guess in New York, I don't know where you grew up, but in New York, schools like Flatbush Yeshiva and DRS and I don't know, all these well-known I forgot the name of the school. But in any case, it's the tolerance for such things today is much, much lower than it ever was. I mean, because we live in a society where the tolerance for these things today is much lower, and it's being exposed. So I can say that in mainstream schools, if anything of the nature was raised, it would be dealt with profound seriousness and real urgency. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. The schools that are not as mainstream, that are very private, that are private on purpose, that are run that way, I can't speak for those schools. And unfortunately, it may very well be that a degree of this is still, or may go on, in various areas. That's something that we have to be conscious of as parents. I mean, one of the nice things, I was just talking to, we were talking the other morning, and God bless, we were saying, to be a head of a Jewish day school is to have, all of the parents are your bosses, basically. So you have to, answer to everybody, which is absolutely true. But that's one of the things about sending a child to a private school. You have, you can demand that these things are done. But if the system is not there to support you, it's very difficult. In my experience, in modern times, now in 2022, it's very, very seriously dealt with, and it's very rare that we really have a systematic problem, like this in the school. So that's the first thing I'll suggest. The second is with regards to the Aramaic. Look, I'll tell you, I believe it shouldn't be done. It should not be done. Appropriately, Talmud was taught to children at 13, 14 years old, not until then, and that was only really taught in a very serious way to much older students who were interested in continuing their study into deep rabbinic study. It wasn't for the general population. And that's certainly not a Sephardi thing. I don't mean to separate between Sephardim and Ashkenazim, but the Ashkenazim really were the ones who instituted this idea that Talmud should be what every child learns. And that was never the case amongst the Sephardim, and not in my school. So in my school, it was a primary school, so it was from 2 years old to 13 years old. And I only taught the 8th grade, the last grade, some Talmud, just to prepare them for high school so they wouldn't go into high school oblivious. But outside of that, like I said, we completed all 5 books of the Torah. We taught Hebrew in Hebrew, Ivrit b'Ivrit. Thankfully, the students in my school were the best in the tri-state area in Hebrew. They could run circles around every other student. And instead, what I taught them was to be able to look, as they got older, we looked at the Torah, the Chumash, and encouraged critical reading, right? To be able to understand, the structure of the psukim, and to be able to delve into, more of the understanding. But I don't believe it should be done. I think it's a problem. And the Rambam writes. The Rambam writes a letter to his student. He says, "Look, I've written a book that saves you the time of having to go through this vast sea of the Talmud to try and figure out what to do." He said, "Don't worry about that. I've taken care of that for you. Now just study my book." And and you'll get it all. Because he says at the end of the day, studying the Talmud is to know what to do. And it's much harder to study the Talmud to know what to do than to read my book to know what to do. My book will tell you what to do, and that's it. Now, if you want to be able to be a scholar, and you want to really dive into the repertoire, the entirety of Jewish thought and knowledge that has been spoken about over the last 2,000 years, well, by all means study Talmud. But it's not for 10-year-olds. So that's my, perhaps not majority opinion, but that's my opinion. That's how we did it in our school. And that's how I believe really that children should be educated. I don't know how we are with time. What's our okay?
We have some more time.
Okay.
I have two questions. Number one is, like you said in the beginning, you should teach your children that their homework is just addition to the school, right?
No, I said the opposite.
And it's all right. Their homework
Yeah.
is the main,
Yeah. See what happens? Go ahead. Yeah.
So the question is, what do you do if you don't have the knowledge at the level of Hebrew, Judaism, whatever, the parashah, and you have not studied in Shiva or don't have the basic Jewish education, but you want your child to go to Israel, especially if you know that the school, for example, is not as high level where you don't learn like all the parashot and all this, and you want your child to have this addition, but you don't have the level at home to teach it. This is a different question. Maybe I can
Okay, so the first question is a good question. I mean, it's an important question. What if you want, if I understand, what happens if you want your children to have high level of knowledge and behavior? You yourself don't necessarily have that level, and the school may not be teaching to that level, but you want them to have that level. Is that the question? Right. Okay. So the first thing that I'll say is le'at le'at, right? Little by little. It's okay to have very lofty goals, right? But one must also recognize what are the resources that I have right now. Now, the truth of the matter is, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You have a phenomenal resource right over here, right? And the rabbi. Because you are very lucky to have a phenomenal rabbi, right? Who really does know. Yeah. So not to put more work on his already exorbitantly busy schedule, right? But it's important when you don't have the knowledge to ask somebody who does. Yeah? So you outsource. That's what you do. Yeah? And so you do that. You ask your rabbi, guidance for things that you're not aware of. And if you're questioning balance, right? Well, should I do this? Should I do that? You advise. Advise. Not everything needs to be done by ourselves. That's the beauty of community. Community is you can ask people who know what it is you should do. Right? So ask the experts. Ask the scholars. Let them help you. Yeah? That's number one. Number two, I really, really do want to emphasize. In Hebrew we say, tafasta merube lo tafasta. Right? If you try to grab too much, you grab nothing. So, little by little. So it's wonderful to have lofty goals, but recognize where we're at right now. And do where we're at right now. And little by little, in increments, you push forward. But I will say one thing, which is not really directly what you're asking, but I'm going to say it in response to what you're asking. And that is, it is really important for us to remember, I can't stress this enough, that we cannot control other people, including our children. We cannot control them. Not from the time that they're born. We just cannot control them. We think we can. But the reality is that we can barely control ourselves. It's the truth. We don't struggle to control ourselves, but we think we can control everybody else. And we cannot control other people. We cannot control our children. And we think we can make them something. You cannot make your children anything. What you can do is support them and give them the tools and the resources and all that they need to the best of your ability to be what they will be. You can encourage them, you can advise them, you cannot make them be something. And once we accept that truth, life gets to be much easier for us and much more pleasant. Because we cannot control it. So it's providing resource, support, guidance, yes, but controlling, no. And there's an important to know the difference between the two. Shall we do a second one, or do you have a second question?
Yes?
Okay, go ahead.
The second question is, I think everywhere where you are in the main community, the challenge is when the kids have the situation as teenagers, there is no Jewish education anymore.
Sorry, I'm not.
In Zurich, for example, like in Zurich or Switzerland, after such an age, there is no Jewish possibility of Jewish school anymore.
Okay.
When they are like after 6 or 8 years. So then you are obliged to send like one part of the more religious community sends kids to the yeshiva, and another part of the community sends to the public school. So how to deal with like I'm not getting this status, but when they're teenagers who go to public school, and today the modern world of everything is very, very seducing, right? How to deal with the situation?
Yeah, you know what? The question is, that the formal Jewish education in Zurich, as I understand it, runs for primary school, and then it's kind of stopped. There's not a lot of ability for that, and then
secondary school.
Sorry?
The secondary school.
Right, to what age?
Till age 15, 16.
Okay, so till 15, 16, there's some formal Jewish education, but outside of that, after that, there isn't really, so some people send to yeshiva, and some people send to public school. What do you do? It's a real problem.
So let's collect money.
Look, look, I will say to you, it is a problem. It's a problem. And I'll tell you why. That age, right, from 16 to 20, is a profoundly impressionable age. Profoundly impressionable. And I would say that it is extremely important to look at that as a community and to see what we do as a community in order to be able to help that and to kind of enrich that. Yeah? Even if it means, look, I also believe this, again, this is just my personal belief, I think that 15, 16 years old is too young to send a child away from home, personally. I think it's too young. I think that a child should stay home until 17, 18 at least. And then I think it's important to send them away. I do. They have to go away. Yeah, and they have to be given. But before that, I think it's a bit too young. So look, I don't have a good answer for that. I think, again, with the current situation, home is essential. If you can supplement, right, if you can ask somebody to teach them, to learn with them, if they're willing to, which is very difficult at that age, it's not so easy, by all means, maybe you do some extracurricular stuff, from the Rav or from the Kahal, and where, you have youth groups, right, there's Bnei Akiva and so on and so forth, these kinds of things, youth groups, you enhance those, groups to make sure that there's learning that's happening in education. So those are important, right? As long as there needs to be something, right, that they have, that they can go to, they can belong to during that time, because it is a very impressionable point of life. But I still would say, I think that for the long run, it's important to be able to create a bit more of a formal structure on it. But I say that as a visitor. I don't say that native. I can't say properly. I've only been here for a weekend, so I don't. So you take that with a grain of salt. Yes.
You mentioned how behaviors are more important than just the learning, and you mentioned that from your perspective, Friday night dinners are kind of one of these touchstones of behaviors. I understand that all of us have to choose for ourselves what's meaningful as family, but I'm curious as to what other behaviors you would see as kind of these core touchstones of Jewish life.
Yeah, in the home, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, I mean, it also has a great deal to do with just how it is that we build a Jewish home, right? So again, I don't know the levels of everyone here and how everybody runs at home, but kashrut, for example, at home is valuable beyond just the law of kashrut. Yeah, it's something that binds us and that we recognize as part of our identity. And so this is something that we have to be careful about. It's something that I have to be conscious of. Yeah, it becomes part of who it is that I am and what I do. And as the kids grow up, whether they choose to continue or not continue, that's their thing. But it's part of an environment. Yeah, it's also valuable, I think, to be able to see prayer of some sort at home. Even though we go to synagogue a lot, I think it's important to be able to see prayer. The washing before eating and the Birkat HaMazon and those kinds of things. Those are rituals that nonetheless, look, it's important that they shouldn't just be rote, right? There should be some knowledge about what it is that we're doing over here. But those kinds of things are valuable because, again, there are markers in the Jewish life, right, in daily Jewish life, as to what it is that we do. So even if it's when the children get up, you do a little bit of prayer with them in the morning, right? Shema Yisrael, Modani, or whatever the case may be. Those things are valuable, again, because it creates neural circuitry, right? It creates regulatory behavior that is very much part of the experience in life. And if it's done with care, and it's done with enthusiasm, and it's done with, rather than make sure you say your prayers, I'm not saying that's what you do, but if that, it becomes the nature of the water in which the children are swimming. So the same way, the fish don't know that they're swimming in the water, right? You know that joke? You know that little, with the fish? There was two young fish that were swimming along, They're swimming, talking to each other. And then an old fish swims by them and he goes, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And they swim on a little bit, and then one turns to the other and goes, "What's water?" Right? They don't know. They don't think about it. It's just where they live. They have no idea it's water. And what I'm saying is that if it becomes part of the normal and natural environment of the home, it helps. So things like that. Yeah, things like that. Does that help? Yeah? Yes. Sorry.
One question regarding peer influence.
Yeah.
Because we know it gets more and more especially So what is your experience and advice?
Oof, that's a good one. The question is, what about peer influence? And, the interactions between, children of same age and the time that they spend together and so on and so forth, and how that runs with regards to things. Yeah, I guess this will be our last, perhaps, I don't know, I have no idea how the timing is. One more after this. So, it's a tough one because we are a profoundly social species. Nobody thinks for themselves. Nobody. Right? We think we do, but it's not true. When you say to somebody, think for yourself, you're really saying, don't think like these people, think like these people. It's what we do. We are not wired for completely independent thought. It's important that we should try to be around people who are open to reflection and questioning and so on and so forth. It's very, very important. So I say that as an introduction because the environment and people in which we find ourselves is, whether we like it or not, profoundly influential on what it is that we do. And, so it's a question of community. It's a question of how you wish to engage with community and with whom your children are playing, behaving with, and so on. We are not necessarily at full luxury, to be able to curate, to choose perfectly exactly who it is that I want my children to engage with. And that's why, again, I say, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but again I say that the primary social environment for a child is the family, right? So it may be that a child will be influenced by a child's friends. But there should be, at the very least, as if these are friends that I don't particularly love my child to be with, right? Which may be, there should be at least some element of the child's mind knowing mom and dad will ask me about this, or know about this, not approve about it, and so on and so forth. Because that creates some level of balance. But I don't think that there's a foolproof way to do it. Because I'll tell you what. I don't believe that it is possible to just build walls around the children and not have them interact with the world. Especially now that we have phones, and if they don't have a phone, somebody near them does. Everywhere we are is a portal to the entire world. So the only way that we can deal with the portal to the entire world is to ensure the internal identity of the child, at the best of our ability. That's why Chazal say, for example, there is a requirement, the Talmud says, right, there is an obligation for us to teach our children how to swim. Because there's no option that maybe they won't find water. They're going to be near water, and they're going to go in it. You need to make sure that they know how to swim. So they're going to be in the world, they're going to be interacting with it. You, at the very best of your ability, teach them to be able to hold themselves in integrity. I can't believe I think you can. Okay, Kvoda.
Can I ask a question?
Please, by all means.
So on Shabbat,
You're pulling reindeer.
on Shabbat we read about the Ben Soer Moed, the rebellious child. And before you touch on it a little bit, I want to ask a bit more specific. Sometimes children rebel, either because they're angry at you, or because they don't like what they rebel. I don't want to go to shul. I don't want to. How do we deal with it?
Okay, that's the last question, huh? Yeah. Okay. So again, I can only tell you how I've dealt with it and how I think really best to do it. It seems to me that the thing you don't want to do is to reject them because of it. You definitely don't want to do that, because the power of rejection in general for a human being, of a casual friend, of somebody I don't even know, right? I realize this person doesn't like me. I don't even know the person, right? But I know the person doesn't like me. It is profoundly difficult for us. It is exponential when it comes from a parent. There are two people, right? There are essentially, in most families, two people that every human being wishes to find acceptance with. And that's parents. Even if we tell ourselves we don't, we do. And we spend our entire lives trying to earn the acceptance of our parents if we find that they don't accept us. And the interesting thing is that unfortunately parents know this some way and they use this. Right? Don't use it. Don't use the power that you have as a parent. I don't want to get... I'm getting emotional from it. And the reason I'm getting emotional from it is because it's that powerful. It is profoundly damaging. So, do not reject your children, even casually. It's okay to say to them, I am not happy with what you did. And this is why. And even if they're too young to explain to them why, which sometimes they are, they're too young to explain, say, I'm not happy with this. Why? Because I said so. That's okay. I still believe it's okay for a parent, if the child is very, very young, I said so is enough. Later they can learn, right? But the rejection of a child, even slightly, lasts for the rest of their life. They will have to do a lot of work in order to be able to address the fact that they experienced it from a parent. And I know I'm speaking very seriously, and as parents, it's like, oh no, what do we do? Yes, I'm saying it's that serious. Never use rejection as a way of trying to rehabilitate a child. Yeah? What you can do is say, this is important to me. And if there has been a relationship that is built that is valuable, that will mean something to the child. Even if at first they can't bring themselves to care, right? They can't bring themselves to want to. Yeah? But if you say as a parent, this is important to me, this is something that I do really wish that would be valuable to you, or that you would do that is important to you because so and so forth, that's okay. Because you're a parent, you have every right and ability to like things, to want things, to value things. You have every right, as they do. And like I said at the very beginning, in relationships, sometimes we compromise our full freedoms for the relationships that we have, and ultimately we hope that it'll be meaningful to them in their own right. But that's the way that we should do it. I think that's the way it should. And it could be that the child, for this particular period of time, is not equipped, is not ready to do what it is that you want them to do. But if they know that you love them, and they know that they are accepted, and they know that you care, and they still know this is not okay with dad, it's not okay with mom, that I'm doing this, there is always an opening for them to be able to circle back and re-engage. And so I think that's a very, very important thing to hold and keep, because the alternative is if I say, I'm disapproving of you, or you are not okay, or you can't come here, or if you do this, then you're not there, that kind of thing, that may keep the child may stick around, but the child will always carry a feeling that I am not worthy. And that's the last thing that we want a child to feel. Yeah? Even in a Jewish perspective. In other words, you don't get any brownie points with God. You don't get any points, right, with God by making a child feel that they are not worthy of who they are. Yeah? You can say to them clearly, this is what I want. Say to them clearly, this is meaningful to me. Say to them clearly, this is important, and I think that you really should be doing this. You can say it every time you see them. That's fine. But to say, if you don't, then you are in any way, don't come to dinner. Don't come to the dinner table if you're not wearing a kippah. I don't think that's a great thing to do. You can say, please put on a kippah when you're sitting at the table. But I don't want to say, please, when you sit at the table, everybody's wearing kippah, I would please like you to wear a kippah. Please. If they insist on not doing it, you would say, I'm very disappointed that you're not wearing a kippah. But I would not say, you cannot sit at this dinner table until you put on a kippah, get out. Right? There's a balance here. A balance here. So I would say, I don't know if that properly answers, but I think that that's an important... All right. Sorry for getting emotional on you over there. But
shows us that you're a human being.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so